Since you have Nvidia as a name you like, let's talk about it. I mean, they have a $350 price target. Do you see a lot of upside potential for an Nvidia, and if so, why?
I do. I mean, Nvidia still is the absolute choke point in AI, and they're absolutely essential to this growth, which is still quite phenomenal. And when you think about it, in most all these tech companies, what I'm liking is that the E is growing faster than the P. If you look at PE ratios, earnings are growing faster than prices are. Nvidia's like, what, 22? Take a look at a company that's growing as fast as they are, with the earnings growing as fast as they are, and having a forward PE of 22. So I think I would agree with Bank of America on this.
Yeah, and Bank of America actually said that this call here is because of the $105 billion investment commitment with OpenAI. That's one of the reasons, along with many others, just the shift in the commitment that NVIDIA is showing. The benefits of AI, we're waiting for the monetization, but this just shows the trend overall. Is that right?
I think so, but when we talk about AI, you've got to remember, 56% of the companies in America now have an AI account, and they're paying for this stuff. And of those, 71% of them are showing increases in labor productivity. So when you think about, and then like maybe only 7% of them say that they fully integrated. So you see this huge opportunity for AI integration, and we're still just building out this infrastructure, and NVIDIA and many of these companies are absolutely essential to that. So I think you've got a very strong continued push in what's going on, because in the end, if AI is increasing labor productivity, people are going to buy it. I mean, if it didn't increase labor productivity, it'd be just an interesting, parlor game or interesting.
Do you feel
game.
like they're being so? I mean, this is not a Bank of America segment, but the price target, we could discuss that. Where you really 50% upside, really. When they call 350, it's a 219 or so. It certainly shows an aggressive move. I mean, they're not saying 250. Do you really think that some of these tech names can move 20, 30, 40, 50%? You have a slew of names that we're going to be discussing in here. I mean, you have NVIDIA and Microsoft, right. Two of the sort of the big names that people know and like. Are those the kinds of names that can move 20, 30, 40, 50%?
When earnings are moving 20, 30, 40, and 50%, which is happening, then the price of the stock is. Record earnings are going to be record stock price.
Interesting in the sense, NVIDIA's stock is coming up against that all-time high, I believe, hit on May 14th.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting setup here, and there's going to be a lot of questions about not their free cash flow, but the way it's deployed. And so the way Bank of America is coming at this is through a sum of parts free cash flow, and they're comparing NVIDIA to some of their peers like Marvell or AMD, which on that basis are very much over, you can see AMD, Marvell for 2027, they got those 46, 49 times multiple, and then B of A kind of backs into the calculation. NVIDIA has all these so-called circular financing deals. Even if you impair 50% of its cash flow, they still end up with some pretty big numbers. And so based on that, they're saying NVIDIA should be trading a lot higher or should be a lot more expensive. In other words, it's cheap right now. I think there's going to be two really interesting things to come on the call. First, what is NVIDIA doing with buybacks? And this is something that B of A really calls out here, because if you increase your buybacks, and NVIDIA hasn't done as many as a percent of its total free cash flow as some of its peers, but if you increase that, a lot of the concerns about circular financing deals go away because you're giving shareholders back the cash flow. The other is all their investments, including off-balance sheet investments, and the size of those and how they're being treated on an accounting basis. So I think those are two things that investors are really going to look for, and that's something that kind of blows my mind, because a year ago that was on nobody's radar.
Eric, it's days like this where I miss picking stocks, because I would have come out and made this call on NVIDIA ahead of earnings.
Well, I've thought it's been cheap for a while, but if I could pretend I'm Jared and say, hey, let's go to Wi-Fi Interactive, and you can pull up the last 3-year chart of
Here we go.
NVIDIA.
Go ahead, Eric.
And so I think it's sort of law of large numbers that's plaguing them. A great company, great CEO, got nothing bad to say about Jensen. But I think, there's a reason why Marvell is a higher multiple. It's because it's smaller and the market sort of believes the growth is coming. So I don't know. Can stock buybacks do the trick to kind of juice this thing? I mean, I guess it did for Apple, but it didn't do it right away. It took a couple of years for the market to realize that the EPS was getting better over time and so forth. So I'm not sure. I think that names like Nvidia and all the memory stocks, they've obviously all had a run. Nvidia had it first, then the memory stocks later. I think the market is kind of sniffing out like what are going to be the next set of stocks to benefit from AI that are going to go buybacks or so forth.
And Eric, I think investors are not given the respect this portfolio of stocks at Nvidia or the companies that Nvidia has invested in enough respect. Why is it so bad that Nvidia has invested in OpenAI and Anthropic? I mean, I get they're basically the same companies, but still, both of them are like to have massive IPOs. Nvidia's going to get paid.
It's not bad. It's a good thing. It's not circular. I don't have time for these people to say it's all circular financing. Oh, .com, it's a house of cards, is going to fall. I mean, these are just the bears that are perennial bears. There's a reason why they want to support this ecosystem around them to buy their chips. So it makes perfect sense from an operating perspective. And that's a different question from, is the stock going to work over the next 6-12 months?
Chew on this morning. Let's start with chips, because the market was quick yesterday to assume that the sell-off in semis, which got butchered, had something to do with the global bond sell-off. Now we're seeing yields coming off quite substantially on this treasury move. However, chips are still down. What does that go to show about how these stocks trade? I mean, it just feels like they move up and down on basically no news.
They're volatile. I mean, no doubt about that. I mean, take a look at the Kospi last night. It was down 5%. Even if you look at just something a little closer to home, our SOX index, it's moved 10% from the highs that well, not highs, but the relative highs that we saw just last week. And that was off a 20% move from the July lows, 20% move back up. It's volatile right now. There's a lot of I think there's still a good amount of leverage within that trade. So when you start to see these swings, you start to see these positions unwind quite a bit. I know you and your previous guests were talking about the Nvidia earnings next week, and that's a major catalyst for the stocks in the semiconductor space. They need Nvidia to kind of provide a bit of a kick save right now, maybe and pull some of this volatility out. Just because there's a lot of whipping action today. I'm just kind of looking at the screens right now, and you look at all the AI and AI adjacent names, and you're seeing multiple stocks within those sectors that are moving 4, 5, 6% just today alone. So even though above the surface, right, the overall index looks pretty calm, chips are not providing any type of boost at all today.
What about this Marvell Google news? I mean, obviously Broadcom down quite substantially on that news. Do you think that has something to do with it? Because it was interesting after the Korean Kospi closed last night, you had SK Hynix coming out talking about share buybacks. Now that stock is higher today, so is EWI. So, obviously there is some good news here, but is this the culprit, do you think, this story?
I think, Sam, that has a little bit more to do with just kind of the circular financing that has been talked about for the last 6 to 12 months. As you start to see all of these kind of intricate derivative plays start to build in terms of who owns what and who's financing what, and now we've got the potential not potential, but the deal between Marvell and Google, which will allow them to buy some shares if certain things are met. It just kind of goes back to how much of this activity can we kind of see above the surface, and what does this financing look like? And and it kind of also goes back to the big issue that we've been talking about for a while now, at least Wall Street has, this idea that these were companies that were free cash flow monsters, right? They had sterling balance sheets, and now they're going to different levels, whether that's through the bond market or different type of creative financing as a way to generate deals, just because that free cash flow is no longer there, or at least it's going to take a while to build back up. I think it goes more to that than it does necessarily who's the winner and loser from one or two deals.
Yeah, and now you've got Google tapping the Aussie market with the kangaroo bonds now, and it's been interesting just watching this global bond sell-off and this correlation with AI stocks. I mean, even Ben Emmons has been writing this morning that there seems to be this tightening link between 30-year yields and semiconductor benchmarks right now. So it's fascinating. You mentioned Nvidia. As far as a broader market indicator, I mean, does the market need Nvidia more than Nvidia needs itself? Because the story seems to be one of, obviously valuation compression here, consolidated growth, but still the fundamentals holding up pretty well. But also, just as you touch on the circular financing, I mean, Jensen was out last week talking about, obviously trying to find new check writers from some of the guys here on Wall Street.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of a decoupling, I would say, the last few months, Sam, between just NVIDIA and the overall market. And I think a lot of that goes to what we've seen in terms of maybe some of the sector rotations. So, NVIDIA for a while was kind of stuck in the mud between 190 to 200 and finally kind of broke out. But I think the narrative is more important than maybe just the overall move itself. I think the narrative that there's still demand out there for the chips, that they still have the ability to raise prices. You're still seeing multi and double-digit moves in terms of revenue and in terms of our earnings growth, and the margins. I think that's going to be another big story too, as well. Is just at some point you're going to see those compress. I think we continue to think that can get pushed out to 2027 and even 2028 for through a lot of the analysts' expectations. But I do think that kind of given, and the other thing I'll add to that too, Sam, is it's a slow news flow right now, right? So anything that NVIDIA says is going to be magnified a little bit more just because of the fact that there's not much else going on. We're at the end of the earnings calendar, and it really is a staple event.
All right. Let's just talk about this financing deal, because obviously a report at this stage, nothing that seems to have been confirmed, but it's not the first time we've heard of a tech company tapping the debt market. But how significant is this move?
No, I mean, it's just another potential deal in the latest flurry of moves that we've seen to fund this AI infrastructure build out. But again, as you mentioned, it's just reports right now. Bloomberg, the initial reporter of this, that Broadcom is in talks with a group of lenders that aims to raise more than $60 billion in debt here in a financing deal that will reportedly benefit Anthropic and other companies. The financing is reportedly still being finalized. It may also include a roughly $30 billion junior debt tranche. So under this proposed plan, Broadcom would allegedly guarantee a portion of the senior secured tranche, which could range from about $60 to $70 billion. Cumulatively, that would bring the total to as much as $100 billion for this particular deal. Blackstone and Apollo are reportedly in talks with Broadcom to participate in this chip financing, following a partnership that the three companies struck back in June to help finance computing infrastructure. So it wouldn't be the first time that they'd interacted in this way. The debt would also reportedly be issued by a special purpose vehicle, some of the people involved said in this reporting. The talks are ongoing. Of course, details can change here, and these are unconfirmed details at this point. The financing could also be rolled out incrementally rather than all at once, was another key point here. Spokespeople for both Broadcom and Anthropic have not commented, though they've declined to comment here, as did representatives for Apollo and for Blackstone. But Anthropic has been taking a bigger role in this build out. They're aiming to ensure that they have enough computing capacity. Broadcom, on the other hand, is looking to sell more chips and other equipment to try to rival Nvidia's dominance in the market. Now, this potential deal could help Anthropic access chips and other key AI infrastructure features, could also be similar to this $35 billion debt agreement that they kicked off the group's AI XPV partnership. That first deal, of course, Broadcom backstopped most of that debt, and investors, which include Apollo and Blackstone for that, financed the purchase of the custom AI chips, which were then leased to Anthropic. That enabled the senior debt tranches to win investment grade ratings at lower borrowing costs. So we could see a similar structure here. But again, this is just reporting right now, but would not be unlikely to see this one come to fruition, as we've already seen similar deals like.
Where are we in this in this tech story? Because so goes tech, so goes, I think, maybe everything, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Hey, good morning, Andrew. And I think we're seeing more of that bifurcation. When you look at the price action that we had yesterday, it was very, very challenging in tech and specifically the semiconductor trade. But the broader market still had more upward movers than downward movers. You saw strength in the healthcare space, financials were doing well. So there's a lot of stuff that is still working in this market despite some jitters that might exist around technology. And rising interest rates don't suddenly make technology a bad investment. I think what the market is doing is it's finally starting to suss out and ask questions more around, can these companies actually sustain the amount of debt that they're issuing? And it's looking more discreetly at who are the winners and losers going to be. And I think it increases the importance going forward of owning higher quality, high free cash flow generating assets, particularly the beneficiaries of all of that spending, as opposed to, say, the spenders themselves. So there's still opportunities in tech and outside.
Give me some names of folks you went in on, and give me some names you want to stay away from.
So I think the hyperscalers in general are areas I wouldn't not own in a portfolio, but it's not where I'd be putting my marginal dollar. So Taiwan Semiconductor is one of my favorite names right now for portfolios because it's sold off during the month of July, but all roads lead back to Taiwan Semiconductor with respect to this build out. And despite their CapEx plans, we continue to see incredibly strong revenue growth month over month. And they are the only game in town with respect to the most precise chips that are being made. Other names that I think make sense, Andrew, in a portfolio, look at a Welltower to perhaps complement your information technology exposure. It's a healthcare REIT exposed to an aging demographic that we know is growing in the U.S. and continues to increase their margins by making smart acquisitions, shedding some medical office spaces, and really catering towards full service, vertically integrated senior housing. So that's a name that I think is a great ballast to, say, information technology.
One of the questions is just how wide do you think, what kind of transition we have, not just from tech, but sort of the rotation that's taking place, and how much of a rotation you think ultimately is going to take place?
So we've seen this rotation of starts. It's had fits and starts. And I really think there is sustainability to what you're seeing with respect to strength in the financials area. You've seen really, really strong growth across the banks, in particular capital market companies. There is durability there, and there's durability on a global level to that area. I think healthcare is a more challenged space. Earnings growth for this past quarter were actually negative, and you have to be specific. Pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, healthcare REITs, those are perhaps areas that I may think make sense. HMOs, which have done well, I think there's still question marks with respect to that business going forward. So perhaps that's an area to avoid. I think rising rates might challenge utilities a little bit. We've also seen some questions with respect to data center connectivities and states pushing back. So it's selectivity is what's going to be really, really important in this market going forward. And my favorite sectors are tech, financials, and industrials, and not just AI data center industrials, Andrew, but also your more cyclicals, your railroads, your trucking companies. You've seen an inflection with respect to earnings, and financials are corroborating that with really strong commercial and industrial loan growth.